Hi everybody, this is Leo Volont with part 5 of my series. Here's the chapter heading from my blog. Part 5, Jesus the Jew versus Christianity. Paul's bad character. Peter's bad character. The bloody handshake and Paul's real conversion. Yeah, let's start reading. We are never told whether Paul ever met Jesus, but if he had, it was as an enemy. Paul was an admitted and well-acknowledged persecutor of the Jesus community. Now, Jesus said in his sermon that a tree is known for its fruit, and if a man's heart be good, then that goodness will spring forth abundantly. But Paul was a tree that from the very beginning was a murderer of Christians. And so we could never expect a dark and stinking, rotten heart like that to ever change to goodness and light. Really, Paul was a psychopath, and psychopaths are what they used to call demons. It is clear that Paul's arrogance was the same before as after his pretended conversion experience. The Bible does little to hide Paul's blatant loudmouth nastiness. For instance, in the book of Acts, there is described a story that in a visit to Crete, Paul was confronted by a little old man whom he should have acknowledged with deferential respect. But because of some political difference, he got down in his face and hollered so savagely and gestured so wildly that the poor meek little old man took fright and died then and there of a heart attack. And Paul only scoffed, stepped over the body and said, "Who's next?" Well, this is not the portrait of a saint. The book of Acts tells us about a particular milestone in Paul's career where he is the chief thug in the murder plot against Stephen, who had just been popularly elected by the Jesus community to replace Peter. Well, what had happened there was that Peter, his name literally means rock, which is a gangster name, right? Well, Peter had just found himself in disgrace because he had murdered this nice married couple, Ananias and Sapphira, whom everybody liked because they were such good people. He clubbed them to death in his office because they didn't hand over all the money to his communal treasury. They didn't hand over all their money to his communal treasury, which he probably kept in his back pocket. Ananias and Sapphira had held back some of their life savings for a rainy day and they died for it. Now, one can imagine that they weren't the only ones in the Jesus community to hold back a little. After all, haven't we all at one time or another been members of a religious cult where we were careful to leave our bank passbooks at home under the safekeeping of our mothers? Yeah, practically all of us, right? Besides, why should this Jesus community have trusted Peter, that crazy, usurping, self-appointed wannabe pope who thought themselves worthy to step into the master's shoes? Christ. And yes, we still have to deal with the same thing today. Every time some real guru dies, whoever it is that was only around to answer the phone, wash the dishes, pay off the whores, and take out the trash, they come forward and they say, "I'm the boss now," and they raise the dues. There's just no justice. So yes, the whole Jesus community was terrified for their lives and wanted Peter gone, and therefore electing Stephen, who ran on the platform of being reliable, sane, good, decent, and not a demonic, psychopathic killer. So, Paul, lurking off to the side, who neurotically hated all righteous followers of Jesus because they made him feel threatened and insecure somehow, Well, he would have been inclined to kill Stephen anyway, but here he saw an opportunity to ingratiate himself with Peter, who was obviously worldly and corrupt, that is, a man whom Peter could see eye to eye with. So Paul murders Stephen. Oh, wait. Maybe there had already been a deal made between the two, and it wasn't just Paul murdering Stephen on prospect so he could get his foot in the door. Who knows what happened? But however it worked. Peter, no longer worried that a change in regime would have him hanged up by his heels, was so grateful to Paul that they struck up a partnership. Peter would take the Jews and Paul would take the Greeks. With a handshake, Paul was magically transformed from the wolf persecutor of Christians to a shepherd with his own franchise flock. This was the real conversion experience of Paul. We can see how their deal played out. The book of Acts tells us that Paul would send Peter a skim off his take from his mission up north with the Gentiles. Obviously, the price he paid for his franchise. So the book of Acts makes it clear that Peter and Paul were a marriage of self-seeking and corruption. One has to wonder whether the Protestants read their New Testaments for spiritual edification or for insights into capitalist business management practices. Anyway, let's move on to the next one.